Hello, and welcome to my Blade Runner commentary track. I am not the director. I had nothing to do with this movie. I've just seen it a lot. This is a charity incentive that was fulfilled in the 2020 Vinesauce's Hope charity stream. And the idea was if we raised a certain amount of money, I'd do a Blade Runner commentary track. So here it is. I'm currently queued up at the tree that says the Lad Company. Now there's more words that appear after that, but me right now, it just says the Lad Company. We'll do another thing in a second. We'll sync it up at the red Blade Runner logo in a minute. This is the final cut. I'm watching this on the Blu-ray, so I think the DVD should be synced up with the Blu-ray. But if you want to watch along and listen, right now, the tree with the Lad Company, no other words. Gonna unpause. And just now another set of words popped up. Okay. So the movie, we've got Jerry Perenchio and Bud Yorkin present Harrison Ford, Blade Runner in red. So that's where I am. If you want, sync up now. Rucker Howard, Sean Young, Edward James Olmos. Anyway, so here we go. Boy, I've talked about this movie so many times on my streams, and chances are you've seen my streams if you're watching this. This movie does mean a lot to me, but truly, I didn't like it the first time I saw it. I speak true. I hated it a little bit. And then, it wasn't so much a hate. Let me rephrase that. It wasn't a hate. It was more, I don't understand this. Why is Harrison Ford not shooting like Han Solo? Why is he not Indiana Jones? Why isn't the story simple? Why isn't there an ending where the thing blows up? Or the bad guys are defeated and it, you know, makes me feel good? So, not hate, but very confused. And then, I knew, though, I had seen something interesting. I knew that it made an impact on me and had some emotional effect. But I didn't really know why. So, I watched it again. Granted, this is all the final cut. The final cut is the version of this movie that was released in 2007 that removes the voiceover, which I'll explain, and basically touches up some stuff that looked a little weird and adds a couple scenes back in. So yeah, the replicants, that's the main draw of the story. They're basically androids. They didn't want to call them androids. They thought it was a little too, like, 50s sci-fi. So, I forget who it was, but someone came up with the term replicant. I think it was someone's daughter, and then Ridley Scott heard it and liked it. Something like that. But, note the euphemism for killing a replicant is retirement and not execution. So here's the famous landscape shot. So this is a miniature. It's a massive miniature. Tons of little, what are they called? Oh man, I guess it's, they're like little tubes of light. I should know this. Fiber something light, maybe? Fiberglass? No, is it? Maybe. Yeah, fiberglass, I think. And it's basically the front. I think there's some three-dimensional models, and then the back is all just layers of flat cutouts. I think it was acid etched, so they stabilized that eye in the final cut. So there's the Tyrell Buildings, which they have at the Museum of the Moving Image. They only built one of these, and only from one angle. And then they superimposed it over the other one to make it look like there were two. These pyramids. It's an incredible looking miniature. The fact that they were able to achieve so much with this movie without any, special effects that we see now, just miniatures, compositing, practical effects, giant sets. It's pretty mind-blowing. So the Ridley Scott trademark of light and smoke. Lots of atmosphere. It's like every frame is just thick. You just smell it. There's a lot of dimension in this movie. And Alien as well. And that's, a lot of the lighting and cinematography. So, yeah, I guess watching this movie the second time, I liked it more. And then the third time, I liked it even more. I wonder if I can put on subtitles here. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, every time I watched the movie, I liked it more, and I started understanding a little bit more what it was going for, where it wasn't just this cut and dry thing. And it's not the best movie ever made. It's just my favorite. So I forget the story of this this actor, but notice he looks a lot like Harrison Ford, which raises some questions for some people that perhaps he's a model. This particular model looks similar. Yeah, Morgan Paul is this dude's name. So this is an empathy test. This is where they try to determine whether or not a replicant is a replicant, or a human, quote-unquote human, is a replicant. They ask all these questions. See, replicants don't have, the previous models at least. Hang on. Shoot. I still don't know how he got a gun in there. But, yeah. That surprised me the first time I saw that. I was like, oh, this is going to be a big character. And he was, originally. There's a couple other scenes filmed of him in a hospital, so he lived. He just didn't end up okay. Holden. Notice the off-world blimp a scene ago. I like the idea that they tell you about it, you learn about it, but you never actually see it. It's not brought up a ton, but it kind of lends this bigger world aspect to this whole movie, this whole production. It feels massive, mate. And the way this is supposed to be is it basically represents, like, okay, here in LA things are pretty bad, but off-world, that's where you want to be. Okay, Earth is screwed up. In the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, there was something called World War Terminus, which screwed everything up and left, I guess, radiation, and, it was the post-apocalyptic event that led to that stuff. This is different. This is not the book, but you have to assume there's something really bad that happened. And so off-world is where you want to be. They advertise it. Can't get there unless you got a fuckload of money, though. So enter Rick Deckard, as you can see. Just trying to eat his damn noodles. and they're bothering him. Maybe the best line in the movie from this noodle man. It's not quite Tears in Rain, but it's pretty good. I like this half smirk that Harrison Ford gives. That's what he's known for. I mean, that's the Harrison Ford thing. I do think this is one of his best movies from an acting perspective. I never considered Harrison Ford to be like one of the greats. Like he's not a Nicholson or a Brando or, God, Daniel Day-Lewis, but he's a good action movie star, obviously. But he's got some really interesting depth if you put him in the right role. And I think this movie gives him a lot to work with. And there's some subtle stuff in here that Ford does that. When I first watched the movie, you know, obviously I was a huge Indiana Jones fan, Star Wars, even Air Force One, The Fugitive. I think he's good in those. But this is like a different thing. There's a lot of quiet, reserved, like, I don't know, just he kind of gave up, it feels like. All this is just miniatures. They had a giant set for the miniatures, and they set up like a city, and they just filmed it, pumped a bunch of smoke through it, filmed it a bunch with all the camera moves, and composited it. And, yeah, it still looks amazing, especially in the Final Cut version with the touch-ups. So there was a voiceover originally. Many of you who know my streams know I make fun of this voiceover constantly. It was terrible. It was a studio invention because people were lost when they watched it, and they were like, Ridley Scott, you need to add a voiceover. So Harrison Ford, the rumor is that he screwed it up on purpose, or like, not screwed it up, but made it sound terrible. He denies it. But it sounds something like this. Sushi. Cold fish. It's what my ex-wife used to call me. It's so flat. It's just awful. The script is very obvious in the voiceover. It doesn't give you any room to like take in and absorb the movie and figure it out yourself. It just tells you everything. At that moment, he was feeling happy. Which works because there's a noir. You can tell now, especially, there's like a detective noir thing happening here. Future noir, some may call it. Holden's good. Didn't even check the dude for a gun before he walked in his office. So I thought Harrison Ford was saying I'm twice as quick the first time I watched it without subtitles. I was like, is he saying quick? Is he just going to run out of here, like, super fast? But that was, in fact, not the case. Yep. You gotta go and do it. So these TVs look suspiciously like TVs from the 80s. But don't worry about that. Well, one thing I do like about this, it really is an extrapolation of what the future would be like from 1980, like 1 or 2, right? And Blade Runner 2049, when Denis Villeneuve was making that movie, he wanted to keep the technology as analog as possible to keep it as close to the original. So there was like no cell phones. Sure, there's holograms. But there's like a lot of tactile stuff. It's not just pads and like, you know, touch screens. It's a lot more like rugged tech. Like the extension of what the Blade Runner universe would look like from here 30 years later after a big EMP blast, but that's that movie and not this one. Anyway. So Leon here, So Leon, he escaped, and they need to find out why these replicants escaped. And, you know, get rid of them, terminate them, perhaps. Retire them. Skin job is the derogatory term that they use in the future. I say we just call each other skin jobs because we are skin. We humans are skin. Why not? So that's why what I was trying to say before, but I lost my train of thought, was the reason the Voight-Kampff test works is because they don't have emotions the same way we do, because they never really had time to. So they fail the empathy tests because they're like basically adult babies. A lot of advertising, future advertising. There was a quote-unquote curse of the Blade Runner movie where a number of the companies that they showed in this film went out of business shortly thereafter, or sometime thereafter. Atari, TWA, there's more, but those are some examples. So Leon's actor you may have seen in Fifth Element. He plays like the colonel that recruits Bruce Willis. Gaff, who is flying Deckard right now, is Edward James Olmos. He was in Battlestar Galactica as Adama. And his whole thing is that he actually kind of came up with a language combining a number of different languages together. Because in the future, there'd be more, let's say, combination. So the street slang is just a bunch of stuff all mashed together. So I believe the actor himself came up with some of this stuff. Also, amazing score. Soundtrack is one of my favorites from Vangelis. And that's the sound of the Yamaha CS80, which was apparently a very unwieldy instrument that would overheat at times and warble. But Vangelis was a master of it, so he was able to get some amazing, amazing songs out of it. Watch your focus. You got it. Have you ever retired a human by accident? I said that before it occurred, so you're still in sync. But what a question. But here's Joe Turkle. Ridley Scott liked him in The Shining and cast him as Tyrell. He plays Lloyd the bartender in The Shining. Just the perfect dude for the role, really. There was another Shining connection, too, where Ridley Scott had to change the ending to a happy ending. And he asked Stanley Kubrick if he could use some of the shots of the road, because Stanley Kubrick got like so many helicopter shots of that car going up the mountain to the overlook, and Ridley borrowed some of it, used it, and just, I think, superimposed Deckard's car. But that ending was cut from this version because it just made zero sense in the context of this movie, and it was forced by the studio, and it's just trash. But I think it's kind of funny how Stanley Kubrick had like hours upon hours of helicopter shots of a car driving up winding mountain roads, and then only used about 3 minutes of it. That sounds about right. Apparently Kubrick would film 100-to-1 in terms of usable footage to how much he filmed. Where most, I think, would do 20-to-1 or less, 15-to-1. Kubrick was 100-to-1. I want to have them answered immediately. I took a fake Voight-Conf test at a Blade Runner event last year, and I was a replicant. I failed. Note the glow in Sean Young's eyes. It's a little in-camera trick to denote whomst is replicant or not. Oh, it's smoke. My God. In this building, in this room, Tyrell's building, to get that weird effect of lighting, they actually, I think, had like water that they reflected it off of, or some kind of like metallic pan or something. I think it was water. I don't remember entirely, but basically it was a couple people moving this thing around so it would look like water on the walls. I think that's what it was. It was like some weird, dull, reflective surface that they shone light onto. It makes no sense. Like that right there, the lighting, like why is that happening? There's no reason for that to be happening, logically. But it looks really cool. It's behind Tyrell right now. Yeah, that's someone just moving this surface. So yeah, Rachel is a replicant. Doesn't know she's a replicant. They have to give them fake memories. Otherwise, they become erratic. And this concept is explored a little further in the sequel, which, love it or hate it, I think they did a really good job explaining what a replicant, or showing what a replicant would be like, that knows it's a replicant and still has to do its job in hunting replicants. Like the story of Kay in that movie, I think is really tragic and done very well. But in this movie, there's just barely testing out in this time period what's possible in regards to implanted memories, and sadly, Rachel is the first, perhaps. There's also a theory that Deckard is a replicant that has not been answered. Ridley Scott says that he is, and there's clues, and I'll explain them as we go. Harrison Ford believes he shouldn't be, because without a human character to relate to, the audience is then lost, and then you don't have as much empathy. One of the few times Deckard, the detective, does any detective work in the entire movie. So there's another strange, warbly light object happening. in the tub. It's like, what is that? And why, Ridley? Who's doing that? What's doing that? But you wouldn't even really, the first couple times you watch it, like for me at least, I didn't even question it. I just thought, oh, that makes sense. Oh. The stickman, origami man has a tail. As Christopher Walken might say, a tail. No, it's not a tail, it's the opposite end. I guess I could explain it, but given Zora's profession, we'll say, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, the replicants are very obsessed with memories, and so they take a lot of pictures. They're very precious to them. So that scene and this one were taken from another part of the movie. So the intro of Roy Batty, I think, was taken... That shot was taken from the end of the movie. I think. So Rucker Howard, I think, has the best performance in the movie. And I think he's the best character in the movie. And he's the one that leaves the deepest impression on me, at least. Don't get me wrong, Deckard's story is fine, but in terms of like a character arc and emotional growth, it's a weird story because it's so gray. Like, it's not just hero and villain. They both have shades of both qualities. But yeah, they inserted that scene because they wanted to show that his time was running out, and it's a better intro to see him glancing like that over his shoulder. It's just a really good shot, as opposed to him just walking out of a booth. So I think it was the right decision, and the Final Cut version I think cleaned it up so it looks a little bit more appropriate with the background of the shot. Heat tubes, I guess? So you'd be surprised at how many people, or how many movies this dude's been in. James Hong. So yeah, he was in Big Trouble in Little China. I think Dodgeball, or no, what movie was he in? Was he in a ping pong movie? Or he got some weird roles later on in his life, but he's in a million movies and TV shows. This dude got a lot of work. But I think his best role is Lo Pan in Big Trouble. Revenge of the Nerds. Wayne's World 2. There you go. Just does eyes. One of my favorite lines in the movie, aside from that other one I referenced. Rucker Howard has all the best lines in this movie. Big boss. Well, I mean, he wants to live, so he's going to find whoever he can to help him get more life. I believe they only filmed in this room for like 20 minutes at a time because it was like genuinely freezing to get the smoke from their breaths. It's another way that Ridley Scott likes to get authenticity, or rather, torture his actors. Just chewing up that scenery, huh, Rucker? Dude, like, does extra breathy exhales there to make sure you see the smoke. So yeah, here's an actual scene filmed in L.A. That tunnel that's been in a million movies. Gorgeous matte painting. There's there's books. There's all kinds of stuff that shows you the matte paintings. I don't know if it was just Sid Mead, but Sid Mead is a futurist who conceptualized most of the movie. And I have a Sid Mead book. He was incredible. He was absolutely incredible. He did the work on Aliens as well. Tron. But I am not sure if it was just him that did the matte paintings. I forget. I haven't seen the documentary in a while, but there's a really good 3-hour documentary called Dangerous Days that's on this Blu-ray. High recommendation. He doesn't want to feel bad for his prey. His his prey, I guess. It's his job. He's a Blade Runner. He took the job, and in his mind, replicants are dangerous. He has to remove them. That's his job. And they are dangerous. You'll see in the movie they do some shit. But it's not like they don't have their reasons. And that's what makes them compelling and interesting to me, is you don't really have a clear-cut villain. I mean, Harrison Ford is in some ways a villain. I love the apartment, the look of it. I've explored it in in VR, and also there was a full PC, I think, Unreal Engine release of it. It looks amazing. So probably one of my favorite songs in the movie is this one coming up, Memories of Green. Just a weird piano effect, but I can't help but love it. I think it's just beautiful. It really fits the mood of the scene. And it also has like a bizarre futuristic quality to it, some strange noises. It's good. Go home. I think Sean Young is great in this movie, but she hadn't really acted before this very much. And apparently she was a little bit unprofessional at times and didn't quite grasp the enormity of the character. And there's some there's some reports of her like laughing in scenes, and her and Ford didn't quite get along. Sean Young has had some weird history since then, and I saw her at an event where the screenwriter, Hampton Fancher, one of the screenwriters, was there at this place in Brooklyn, and Sean Young showed up, and I'll be honest, I respect her, but she made things real awkward. She made things real awkward that night. And Hampton Fancher and her had, I think, only met like once, and she was coming at him with some really nasty questions, and like, why wasn't I given more or included in the sequel more? So I feel bad for Sean Young. I think she was done dirty, but I also think that she, based on some of her antics, like stealing laptops from movie sets, probably had, I mean, you could look it all up yourself if you want. I don't know all of it, and there's a couple notable ones from the 90s and late 80s. But it's kind of a mix of both. Like, she did some stupid shit, but also the studios fucked her over a bit, and she kind of went off the rails. However, that said, for this first time, you know, like, new movie star, Sean Young, she did a great job in this movie. It's a very understated performance, and it's what it needed to be. And honestly, I think it kind of just goes to show, like, with a good director and a good script and someone who's willing to really put the work in and try hard, like Sean Young was, I think you can get a good performance. And then you have Daryl Hannah, who's just incredible, and yeah, she's the best. She wasn't new to acting, and it shows. She's phenomenal in this movie. Again with the future sax music. I think this is the Blade Runner Blues, if I'm not mistaken. And I could be mistaken. I get the names a little mixed up for these songs. That piano one was called Memories of Green, which is incidentally also the name of a Chrono Trigger song. But I'm pretty sure this is the CS80 keyboard again that just had this saw wave synth sound that Vangelis used to get like that smoky jazz sound. Smoky, bluesy, jazzy. Again, future noir. So apparently it's Vangelis and not Vangelis. But I've said Vangelis my whole life, so if I say Vangelis by accident, then there you go. Okay, Sean Young. Sorry, not Sean Young. Daryl Hannah just now just cut her arm and is still acting, and she really fucked her arm up. If you watch that scene in slow motion, her arm goes through the glass. She actually cut herself pretty bad. She had to get stitches. The production, I think, had to stop. But she's still going. She's acting the fuck out of the scene. And that's the take I believe they kept. I say I believe because my memory's a little hazy on some of this stuff. But that's one of my favorite facts of the movie, is that she just kept going. It's like Aragorn, where he kicks the helmet, breaks his toe, and they just left the shot in. I listened to an interview with this guy. I think his name is Bill Sanderson. What's this guy's name? This actor. William? I'm gonna find out right now, because there's a good interview with him. I don't know where I got that name. I think that's, like, not even his name. But, he's just a dude, like, this actor, he was proud of the work, and they did, like, old makeup for him, and you'll find out soon why, if you don't already know. But this guy's like, kind of like a farm guy, you know, a little bumpkin-y. William Sanderson is his name, yeah. He just seems like a really sweet man. He's still working. He's still doing whatever he can, and he's just a nice, like, one of the... In the interview, he just seems like a nice guy, like the nicest. So the character's not too far off. He makes toys. You know, if this future had video games, he'd just be playing, like, Warzone and Fortnite instead. But considering this is an alternate future... I guess they still have Atari. I mean, this is a highly suspicious situation, but Sebastian is quite lonely, so he's going to let the stranger, who's being way too nice to him, into his house. Doesn't even know who she is. Doesn't matter. So there's that light. Just creating this amazing effect. There's the gun. And Deckard is fucking drunk. Okay, so here's one of the more confusing shots in the movie that people often ask me about for some reason. Well, they ask me about it as if I had anything to do with the production of the movie, but I do have the answer. So this was put in... This is a scene from Legend. They were filming the movie Legend, Ridley's next movie. And they put that horn on that horse. By the way, that horn was a lot floppier before 2007, and they used CG and, like, computers. They used the computer to stabilize that horn, because otherwise it looked a little floppy. I have that Johnny Walker, by the way, and I have those glasses. Not quite the same glasses, but they're, like, square and twisty. And the Johnny Walker I haven't opened, but it's one of my prized possessions, I assure you. So get ready for the enhance scene to end all enhance scenes. Every CSI Miami, or any, you know, detective or cop show has nothing on this when it comes to enhance. But, yeah, so they filmed that unicorn scene, and the reason is a little bit more clear later on, but I'm assuming you've already seen the movie if you're listening to this commentary. So, later on in the movie, Gaff leaves a little origami unicorn on the floor near Deckard's apartment, near the door. And so the idea is that, why does Gaff know that Deckard was daydreaming about a unicorn? Weird, right? But I'll save the theories until later. So here's one of the pieces of technology that I wish we had, where you could just take one picture and get this much detail. I think we've surpassed Blade Runner in many ways, since it is now 2020. And not 2019 anymore. But we don't have flying cars. and we don't have this technology. It's so close, you get to see the, like, the microscopic molecules soon. Still going. Zooming into a goddamn mirror now. All this from a photo. That's so crazy. That was printed. Fucking 3D ink. Still got detail to go. And that's about the limit of the detail right there. It's so... It's so dumb. Like, you could get some pretty incredible detail with digital cameras now. And probably more later. And by the way, that's not even the same pose she was in. There was more of a profile shot, and now it's like more like skewed on an angle. Anyway, yeah, no, that technology blows my mind, and I kind of wouldn't mind having something like that, but I would imagine it's just printed on 3D paper with 3D ink. That's the only way I can figure that out. But hey, in a world, you know, based on 1980s, early 1980s technology, that's pretty fucking cool. Just analog technology extended to its limits. Like, the imaginations of the people who made the film. It's one of the reasons I love this movie so much. Really interesting choice of music here, too. Just a good bit of detective work from Deckard, the detective who does minimal detecting. Hell, McCoy in the Blade Runner game from Westwood does more detecting than Deckard does. There's a podcast that I've grown to enjoy quite a bit called Art of the Score, and they cover this soundtrack and 2049's soundtrack. If you're looking for some supplemental material with people who know more about what they're talking about than I do, then that is a high recommendation. It's interesting, and also you get a recreation of some of the music on a synthesizer that's close to a CS80. It's really good. Immediately gives up the info. I also like the snake in the front of the frame there. So here's another thing we don't have. We don't have a robot crossing guard that says cross now, cross now, cross now, don't walk. Nor do we have hockey mask strippers yet. We do have the face shields. Those are happening a lot. So there's a scene coming up where Zora was supposed to do this whole snake dance routine, and she even learned, the actress learned this whole routine, and they were going to use like claymation and all this stuff, like where she and the snake kind of have this dance together. I don't remember exactly what it was supposed to be, but it was going to be like a spectacular showpiece. And Ridley was like, nope. I don't remember why. I mean, logistically, it was probably just impossible to do. So they do a little trick instead, as you will see. I'll point it out. This guy looks like a taffy. Deckard drinks a lot. Okay, so we don't have payphones very much anymore, do we? But we do have video calls. In fact, this is most of our lives now. Deckard's like, yeah, I'll just give up my detective work here real quick to hang out with Rachel. Also, 125 for a couple seconds of a call. I mean, now with cell phones, we don't have that, but like 1-900 numbers, it would be $1.25 the first minute, 35 cents after. Okay, so now here was the snake routine. All right, so it would cut from Deckard, and you would see the routine. But instead, they just imply that something gross happened. It's a good moment. I think it's a clever device. It's cheating a little bit, but I like it. I like it a lot. And again, I didn't even know there was supposed to be a routine the first couple times I watched the movie, so the fact that that works so well is a testament to how just a quick little gag can make you chuckle, and then you move on. But the actress wasn't happy about it. She, in fact, recorded the snake dance like 30 years later for her YouTube channel. True story. Also, the reason she got the job, one of the reasons, this is Joanna Cassidy, by the way, is that she actually had that snake. That's her snake. So they wanted an actress who had a snake and was good with them. This little voice that he does. It's very Indiana Jones. Huh? That's another thing I've noticed about Harrison Ford. A lot of his roles are actually funny. Like, he does a really good job with little bits of humor. He's not, like, laugh out loud hilarious, but like Han Solo, there's a surprising amount of, like, little moments of comedy. Indiana Jones, specifically the way he gets punched. There's a lot of comedy in Harrison Ford getting punched, and then he does the slack jaw rubber face. But yeah, he's a pretty good all-around actor. You can get him to do pretty well in most roles. So now Zora goes from, you know, just straight, flat hair to this. What is that device that gives you a fro? Someone's going to be like, Vinny, it's just called air. Another Indiana Jones moment there. Harrison Ford's probably sick to death of seeing snakes by now. This face that he makes. The smile. I love that open-palmed punch to the throat that she does. That is... It seems like it hurts. Very impractical, but it seems like it hurts. But they're replicants, so they're stronger. There's some, like, grade A Harrison Ford noises around here, too. Stuff like that. He just doesn't... He just emotes pain so well. And it's so over the top that it works. So yeah, Deckard's gun is one of the coolest guns in cinema history, in my opinion. I may or may not have a replica. You didn't hear that from me. But I can tell you that it is a combination of a couple different guns and some fantasy elements. I don't know the terms, like the gun terms, but it has the thing that are on bolt-action rifles that it serves no function, as far as I'm aware. I'm sure, again, someone would correct me. But it's also a revolver. Has a laser scope on it. Or not a laser scope. It doesn't even have... It just has, like, little LEDs on the side of it. It's a weird one. But I believe they modified an actual Magnum and put the stuff around it so it would actually fire. So you could get that muzzle flash. I'm also a pretty big fan of the sound effect that they use for it in this movie. It's fucking... It's big. So yeah, this is a set. This is on a back lot, and it was apparently really grimy and scummy, and the filming conditions on this movie were not favorable. Most people ended up really hating Ridley Scott and just wanting off the project. He was a bit of a tyrant, but he knew what he wanted, and the results are the most, I think, gorgeously visual movie, or visually gorgeous movie that maybe is of the entire genre. But yeah, all these extras each have their own costumes. There's like future punks. There are Hare Krishnas. There's, you know, different social classes, all created for the movie. So here's a scene coming up. In the original version, it was just some stunt lady with a terrible wig. And it did not look good at all. It was so obviously not Joanna Cassidy, and the wig was laughable. So they refilmed this for the final cut. They got the actress, Joanna Cassidy, all these years later, who still is in great shape, got her a proper wig, and refilmed a lot of this stuff where she crashes through the glass, and they used some CG to insert it in there, and it's so good, I didn't even know until years later. But there's a special feature of how they did it, and it's pretty cool. Joanna Cassidy has been interviewed a lot about this movie, and she seems, again, she's always keen to talk about it. She's very proud of the work. She respects Ridley's work ethic, even though it was a pain in the ass. But yeah, just from a perspective of, like, think about what Deckard's going through right now. You can see it on his face. That's another thing that Ford is emoting really well, is like, well, it's a replicant, but it's a woman. It's a person. And you know, he just called Rachel. So clearly, oh, that tear too on her face, Jesus. But yeah, he's clearly affected by this pretty deeply, especially after the Rachel stuff. So yeah, it's his job, which maybe he was programmed to do, if the theories are correct about him being a replicant, which honestly, I don't really like. I prefer the ambiguity, or I prefer him just being human, and I'll tell you why later. He's barely keeping it together here. Like, how did they find him so quick? I guess they have flying cars. Who knows how far the station is, right? You know, they hear that there's a crime. There's an immediate report back to the station. And then either that or he was nearby anyway. So yeah, just over the halfway point, and you already see that Deckard is really starting to have empathy for the replicants. And that's kind of one of the themes of this movie, is just, yeah, just empathy in general, and how you could put that aside for the thing you think you have to do. And that's one of the reasons why I like Deckard being human. I like that he has to come to terms with the atrocity that is, you know, they were designed to work, but they start to develop emotions. They have personalities, as you can see here. Well, Leon's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was designed to work, so. If you pay close attention to when he smacks the gun out of Deckard's hand, they removed a couple frames, yeah, to make it faster. That's a common trick. Directors remove a frame or two to make the action quicker. However, that transition always bothered me. I just don't know why they removed those frames there. It's a little obvious for my liking. But who knows how sloppy the scene was. These smacks. They're so lame. Time to die. I'm from Chicago. So that exit wound in Leon's head, I think that's an effect from the Final Cut edition. I'm not quite sure that was like that in the original. I don't remember. I've only seen the non-Final Cut version like once. And there's a couple different versions before this. There's the work print, there's the theatrical release, there's the director's cut, and usually they're included on all the collections. Some people have different favorites. Some people like the voiceover where Harrison Ford says, "I was punched in the face." No, smacked. There's blood in my shot glass. You know, I really like that delivery. Ford's choices here were very, very good. I am the business. Another pretty iconic line from the movie. Yep, he's not liking this job a whole lot anymore. I think one of the things that turns people off about this movie, and myself the first time I watched it, the pacing of the movie is very slow. You have a long time to focus. If you watch a lot of fast-paced movies, and even movies from here, like Terminator, you know, you're going to see that this movie takes its time. There's a lot of slow panning shots. There's a lot of moments where you're left 10 seconds on a character's face, you know. But it's really, it helps that everything in the scene is composed so well. And you can really take in the detail of what this futuristic world looks like. The set design is and the conceptual ideas that they brought to life are so brilliant that I can pick something out. Every time I watch this movie, I can see something new. Focus on some different stuff. Look at that little TV screen above Deckard. I never even noticed that. It's just there, I guess. Is it a video machine? Is it TV? Also her eyes. So here's a clue that Deckard may in fact be a replicant, or Deckard, as Ridley Scott and most folks from across the pond say. Deckard. So clues coming up. Possibly. Beefcake Ford. So the music gets a little weird here. And then you look at Ford out of focus, Deckard, and it's like a light glow in his eyes. Now, I don't necessarily say that's proof, because they set that stuff up for Rachel anyway. I think they did some kind of reflector, and the camera was set a certain way so that it would glow, their eyes would glow. I'm not really sure how they achieved the effect entirely, but Rachel was already set up in that shot. And then when Deckard enters the shot, his eyes glow a little bit too. So again, Ridley left clues specifically for audiences to question, and I think it's better to leave the question of whether or not he's a replicant. But I think both are possible. Blade Runner 2049 doesn't answer the question. As Deckard says in that movie, well, ask the dog, you know, if it's real or fake. Like, does it matter? I think it does matter a little bit. Again, I prefer if he's a human, because it's a more interesting story about empathy in that point. With that being the case, and I'm glad that Denis Villeneuve didn't answer the question and left it just a question. Another clue. Note the photos that Deckard has. He's got a lot of them. And replicants sure seem to like photos. Again, not definitive proof for me, but interesting. She doesn't even know why she knows how to play piano. So there's an uncomfortable scene coming up, and I'm not a huge fan of it. Apparently, most people weren't. It's something that I think they tried a bunch of different ways, and it just didn't work. And it's a little dated. The 80s were an interesting time. Also, there's a scene in Empire Strikes Back that reminds me of this. It's just the way Han and Leia interact, and one of the reasons that Leia eventually kind of falls for Han is he's he's a headstrong. He can be foolish. He can be a little too forceful, but that was kind of the machismo thing that was in movies a lot at the time. And so they tried a scene, and it didn't work. The scene was originally very, like, it was just a sweet love scene. But apparently Sean Young kept laughing throughout the whole scene. And Ford was becoming just irritated by its, the lack of professionalism. Again, it's a movie set, and one thing is to make everyone comfortable, but then another thing is when the scene is just going poorly, your actor is laughing. On some level, they probably tried it and understood and gave her a chance to get it, but apparently it wasn't good. So I think it was a director's commentary or something, I learned that they switched the scene from a sweet love scene into what you're about to see. Though I'd kind of argue that it fits the character of Deckard better. Like, this dude is a drunk. You know? And yeah, apparently this is what worked. So I guess for me, I don't even want to know what the other versions of this were if they didn't work, and this was the best shit they had. But I guess what they were going for here was, okay, again, Deckard is a rough guy. He kills androids for a living, right? So he's already got that. And she doesn't really know what she's doing, so he has to teach her. I think it's awkward and weird, and I felt that the first time I watched it, but it's what they chose, what they went with, and so I have my own little version of what the point of this is. How they could have just kissed and then, like, faded to a different scene, and that probably would have been enough. Like they did in the TV shows. So I'd argue, though, that that's not even the most uncomfortable shit in the movie. Some of the stuff that Pris does later makes me feel more gross. Same for Roy. There's a scene with a nail, but there's some uncomfortable shit in this movie, for sure. Some gouging coming up, Look at this toy's face. Jesus. Gotta keep that nose perfectly still. Otherwise it wobbles too much. I believe this is what they call a thirst trap in common parlance. So he's, he's old boy. What they did to make his skin look like that, I think, was they stretched it, or they applied some kind of like tape to it, and it makes it all wrinkly. And then they just film it. I forget exactly how they do it. Either stretch or tape or something weird like that. Maybe stretchy tape. So Rucker Howard, there's an interesting documentary I watched about him that I remember so little of, but he was in some movies. I don't know how Ridley Scott even found him, but this really is his best role. He's a Dutch actor. So I think he was in a bunch of Dutch stuff. And then after this, Soldier of Orange was a movie he got some recognition in. It's a Paul Verhoeven movie, Dutch film. And then, he got a couple good movies after this. Lady Hawk was pretty good. I'd recommend that. Blind Fury is fun. Red Letter Media, I believe, covered it. The Hitcher is also pretty good. So he's great. He was great, but I think he peaked here. He was also in Hobo with a Shotgun. And some of you may know him. He did the voice acting of the main character in Observer, which, as you can tell, was very much inspired from Blade Runner, if you've played it. But Blade Runner was actually inspired by some other stuff. This wasn't just like... So some people credit this as the birth of the cyberpunk genre. I wouldn't even say this is all that punk. But it has the derelict city future. And it's established a number of tropes. And it's, for that reason, very, very influential. But I would say it's more influential for how beautiful it is and how expertly done it is, rather than that it's just a derelict city. I think there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it. And I can see its influence on so many things. It's the Blade Runner effect. It goes so far. From games to more movies to something like Akira, which I just saw. Perfect Dark has a level inspired by this. Several, in fact. Oh, God, there's so many games. The movie The Fifth Element has a lot of Blade Runner in the day. It looks like that. But it was actually a magazine called Heavy Metal that started in 1977. I have to look that up, but it basically was like steampunk and dark fantasy. It was some of the influence for this movie was from Heavy Metal magazine, if anyone didn't know. So this isn't like the first, but it took inspiration from that and some other stuff. And if you watched Alien, you can see what Ridley Scott likes in his movies. The lived-in, like, dirty future. I like the desperation in his eyes. It's so easy to get lost in the performances, specifically Rutgers. Yeah. the clown lady who followed you home from the dumpster wishes for you to take her weird, like, Adonis boyfriend to the most powerful person in the city. Come on, Sebastian, get with the program. That's the Looney Tunes scene. I call it, with the eyes. Femme fatale. Yeah, the first time I saw this pyramid model, I was surprised. I was at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens for an indie game thing, and I just turned a corner because I was exploring, and I saw the Tyrell building, and I just gasped. I was like, oh, wow, there it is. It's big. It's probably like 5 feet tall. The lights just don't stop. Just every shot. Like, there's not a single shot in this movie that was there was a shortcut taken. You know, like, even the blue lighting on in the elevator, I could just see Ridley Scott getting the right filter, the right gel, the right bulb. You know, making them wait around for like 4 hours while he sets up a shot that basically is just a close-up. But Ridley Scott was going through some tough shit. He lost, I think, a family member. Oh, God, who did he lose around this time? I think it was his brother, perhaps? But he was going through some deep stuff, some dark stuff, and he calls this his most personal movie. So, experiencing that death, I think he just, like, absorbed himself in his work. And, there was some times where he was too tough on his crew, and he complained that, British crews were better than American crews. And there was a big pissing contest. There was a war. They made t-shirts that were making fun of Ridley. Then Ridley wore a shirt that made fun of the crew. Again, it's all in the documentary or the book Future Noir by Paul Salmon. You'd probably, if you like learning about, you know, movie design, production, and this movie in particular is just a wealth of knowledge for, you know, the filmmaking process in general. Definitely recommend that book. I lent it to someone, and then I never got it back. So I have to buy it again. But yeah, the chess scene, I just talked over it because I have a lot of stuff to say about random shit, but that chess scene, I don't have much to say about it other than I think it's just great. Just a great little story beat to get them in the building. But now the creation meets the creator. Originally, he said fucker, by the way, and then they dubbed it over it with the word father. Imagine delivering this dialogue. Imagine trying to memorize this shit. I seem to recall him. There was a story about Joe Turkle having trouble remembering these lines. I wouldn't be surprised if he was reading from a cue card. If you look at where he's looking, it works dramatically, but I wonder if some dude was holding like his lines on a card. I like that moment of awareness. There's the shot from the beginning of the movie. You see the smirk? Just a little bit zoomed in here, and then they painted out the background for the beginning of the movie. Put the city in there. So then there's this kiss, which I think was just an attempt to make the audience uncomfortable, as if crushing the character's head wasn't enough. So there's a simple little trick where they have like little packets of blood. It just worked great. It's gruesome. It's more the sound design here. It's the fucking noises that make it so uncomfortable. Oh man. So there's a shot coming up that I love. But it makes zero sense. And I don't even care. And obviously Ridley Scott didn't care either. This. Like, where are they? Where is he, rather? He's in an elevator. He's in space now? That look. Like a kid. Well, that's the point, actually. And you have Roy Batty trying his best to play adult, but he's still just 4 years old, and he had to make all these memories himself, and he didn't have the memories implanted. He's starting to develop and learn, but, you know, you can see it happen. And that was definitely a face of, like, no. Wait, I did something bad. Fucking flying cars. They're called spinners, by the way. That look on Ford's face. Old friend of JF's. I guess it's just like a little street gang. And they just steal, like, why did they take from his car? And they don't even take it with them. What is that? This took like a piece from his car and just left it there. And the car's fine. Maybe that was the speaker he used to talk to those cops. I'm working, what are you doing? So the Bradbury's actually a real hotel, if I'm not mistaken, or apartment complex, I forget what it is, in LA, and I think they filmed some of this, like the outside of it. I don't remember, in fact, I really don't, but I don't know if they built those pillars specifically for the movie, but then the rest of it's on a set. Well, no, it's not true actually. No, if I'm not mistaken, they filmed in the wee hours of the morning. So Ridley and his team, yeah, this isn't a set. This is the actual Bradbury, I think. And they put a bunch of lights in, filled it with smoke, and just put a bunch of like water and garbage on the floor. And the garbage was cork. So it was just like shaved cork. And they had to clean it. They only had a couple hours to film, so they had to clean it up before the next day. So that means that Ridley Scott had some dude with some spotlights on the on the top floor, just shining them down. It looks so good and so fits in the universe of this movie that I never would have even guessed. Like, it just, you don't even think about it. But yeah, this is then they had to clean up. And when you pay attention and you look at all the little things that they did, like the set dressing to make it look futuristic, it makes sense. Which is another thing. I forget what it was called. They had a word for it. Retrofitting? Where they would take a lot of this movie's technology is just throwing some other technology on old technology. So you'll, like, if you focus on some of the props and some of the vehicles and some of the sets, you'll see it's just like a metal box, like, strapped to another thing. Same for a lot of the buildings. I think this is where some people get a little bit bored, because, you know, if you watch a lot of modern movies, again, not just modern, I could easily shit on newer movies like the Marvel shit, which I like, especially the more grounded ones. But, I mean, even for this time, like, Star Wars came out a couple years before this, you know? And if people came into this, oh shit, another sci-fi movie with Harrison Ford, and they have long, slow, 30-second scenes of the camera following Deckard through a dark hallway, you know, a lot of people are going to get bored. And this movie bombed. It did not do well. It came out around the same time as E.T., so the theory is that E.T. took a lot of the, you know, the focus away from this. And then the other thing is that just audience didn't understand it, or they were expecting Star Wars and got this, like a dark, depressing contemplation on mortality that moves very slow and doesn't really even have a proper, like, finale in the way that you'd expect it to, as I mentioned earlier. So they had to refilm this scene a couple times to get better looks from Daryl Hannah's face. And the flips were done by a dude who was like a gymnast. Like, just this jacked, like, fucking ultra-skilled gymnast dude that they got. They put him in this outfit and had him do flips. That's gotta hurt. So any of that right there, those scenes. So here's the other probably most disturbing moment in the film for me, where Pris starts wigging out. I don't like this. Well, I don't like seeing her get killed either, but I especially hate that they sped up the footage and just screams and kind of Silent Hill. I wonder if Silent Hill saw that and, you know, the director was like, hey, we can do something kind of similar. I always thought that was an interesting noise. that plays in the back of this music. Whatever it is. Just like adds this feeling of disorientation. So, Roy has now lost all of his friends, including Pris, the one who probably meant the most to him. And on some level, it's like, well, he's the bad guy, who cares? But then you think about what he, you know, went through. Like, he was made to work off-world. And he escaped. He just wants to live a life. Because he too is a sentient being. Also, that scene where he kisses her, with her tongue out, apparently, oh god, I forget if it was the studio or what, but people were like, hey, did you know that this actress's tongue was out? And it was totally intentional, you know, just another weird thing. So it's been raining pretty much non-stop since this movie started. And you can see, like, the water dripping. Does that mean that this building is just always wet? Just always leaking? What about Leon? Your friend Leon? I guess never mind him. That fucking line. So yeah, I like the cat and mouse game that Roy's playing with him. He knows he's better than him. He also knows that he's approaching his death date. I guess the howling probably has something to do with the primal, just the way he's approaching this. Is like a predator? I don't know. I probably have heard Rucker Howard talk about this at some point in my life, but don't remember. It's really easy to go down a rabbit hole. Like, this movie didn't do well commercially, as I said before. It didn't really have a huge impact in the theater at all, and it was released in a year where there was just so many good movies. But it started getting a cult following, especially when it hit VHS. And the following for Blade Runner is really just, it's grown. And the thing that's interesting about it is, like, you know, Star Wars, there's a million things that you could buy. There's so much merch, so many shirts. What makes the Blade Runner thing a little bit more special for me is that there's less. You're lucky if you find something kind of cool for it. And learning about all the stuff, like all the production, all the themes, it's really, I don't know, it's just really rewarding. And there are people in this, we'll call it fandom, the Blade Runner fans, there are so many that are way more passionate about this movie than I am. And know much more about its inception than I do. And again, it went on to have a really great cult following that just grew and grew and grew, and then it finally culminated in the second movie, which I still think is good. So there's the scene of the hand that was in his introduction. That's his first scene, is that hand. So they took it from there, paired it with the scene from Tyrell, and gave him an intro through that. So here's the other uncomfortable scene. Yep. So you probably... he's another Looney Tunes moment when he busts his head through the wall. So he's nutty. Notice the emphasis on the word play. Because he's 4 years old. He's discovering emotion. He was built for combat. It's just a big mess. But yeah, the scene with the nail, like, he's dying. He feels he's slipping away. Like, his expiration date is close. So he did the nail thing so we could get some... so he could feel something and maybe get some adrenaline. Get some more time. I could say that again. Still raining. Imagine trying to climb a building with 2 broken fingers. Another great shot. This time we've got, I guess, lightning. So, like I said, there's so many scenes where the lighting just does not stay still. Whether it be lighting reflecting off of smoke, or, you know, just like spotlights from the Zeppelins, the blimps, whatever. Or whatever random, strange liquid light there is that makes no sense. Or, well, in this case, light shafts. I guess that would be considered movement because of the smoke. But it feels like this is one of the realest feeling worlds I've ever seen in a movie to this day. And, again, a big part of that is the practical sets. I'm not against CG, but I see that matte painting in the background. I fucking love that. But, yeah, I'm not against CG at all. I think CG can be used to enhance... forgive the pun, the joke, enhance. But it can be used to do so much. Though it can also take away from what makes a movie feel real. Like, you know, scum, in this case. Like, this movie is just full of scum. There's so much, like, grime and dirt, and here's some more moving lights. And the smoke, everything, every frame of this movie just feels organic. This shot right here with Rucker is just, where did he get the dove from? At this point, you just have to say, well, where could he get a dove from? This shot, I can't not laugh every time I see it. There's no doves in this disgusting city. He made that jump for real, by the way. They just moved the set prop buildings closer to each other. He was like, I can make it if you move them a little bit closer. But yeah, the dove thing always makes me laugh. It's just the symbolism. And that's kind of the core in some ways. Like that line, that shot is very iconic too. But that line is a particularly good noises here. Living in fear, you know, like that whole angle is what makes the replicants want to escape and do some shitty things. And then Deckard finally kind of, Deckard knows what it's like now. And Roy has saved someone. So there's a character arc for both of them at this moment. And here's the famous monologue. Much of it was written by Rucker Howard himself. He wrote down the tears and rain line himself and presented it to Ridley. The music here is called Tears and Rain. It's one of my favorite songs in any movie. Like, who knows what these things even are? Tannhauser Gate? What? Doesn't matter. I used to think some of his acting choices here were a little obvious, but I appreciate them so much more now. It's like he came to that realization as he said it, and he's proud of himself. And he's a machine that developed empathy and like a sense of poetry. It was a really nice moment. So that shot with the dove going up into the disgusting sky, in the original version, it was like a sunny, not really even sunny, it was like a blue sky. And it didn't look like the world of Blade Runner at all. So for the final cut, they composited in what the city would look like there. Because it's like, wait a minute, it's raining, and then you cut up, and it's just this blue sky. And it's like, what? So Harrison Ford's voiceover here would be doing something like, in that moment I knew that he had loved life more than me or anyone. I don't know why he saved me. It's like, oh God, stop. We know. And one of the other cuts of the movie, Gaff also says, you've done a man's job, sir, but are you sure you're a man? You know, a little more overt question. But yeah, Roy saves Deckard. That's the thing. He had spent all of his time killing, and now he gets to experience, just before he dies, what it's like to save someone. So Gaff obviously knows that Rachel's a replicant. Bryant mentioned there would be another. You know, he straight up said, no, you've got 4 left. So of course he's worried about this. Also, I don't know what is on those screens. I have no idea what that's supposed to be, but every time I watch this movie, it's just hypnotic. It's like a cube rotating, kind of? I don't know. So there was originally a good ending tacked on. I mentioned the Stanley Kubrick Shining footage. And they're just driving off into the distance, and it's a forest, and it's sunny, and it's nice, and it looks nothing like the rest of the movie. And Harrison Ford's voiceover is like, turns out she's gonna live after all. No death date. And again, it's the studio's meddling, telling Ridley Scott, no, you need a happy ending, otherwise this movie is not going to sell. You know, we've given you all this time, the movie went over schedule, over budget. You need to add a voiceover and a happy ending. And even Ridley Scott, in all his wisdom of wanting to make his movie the way he wants to make it, probably got scared and said, okay. You know, this is also a dude that probably wanted to continue working in Hollywood. And if he made a giant bomb, which he kind of did, then, you know, who knows if he'd get more work. The studio sure as hell wouldn't bet on him. And even though the movie didn't do particularly well, he recovered, he bounced back. He directed a lot of movies that are pretty well known. Though I would say, even though this movie ended up being a financial bomb, it's maybe his best known and best loved movie, aside from Alien. Maybe even more than Alien for some people. So there's the origami unicorn, and Gaff's voice will probably spell it out. So he's been here. And also a possible indication that Gaff knows that Deckard is a replicant and knows his daydreams. And another fantastic song. Love the credits theme so much. Reminds me of Super Metroid a little bit. And that's Blade Runner. I hope you enjoyed at least some of my commentary. I tried to be as informative as possible. And share some of my knowledge and my impressions. I forget a lot of stuff. There's a wealth of knowledge about this. There's so many interesting production stories. Again, the documentary Dangerous Days and the book Future Noir are great. And I think you can even find Dangerous Days on YouTube. If not, there's definitely some stuff that will get you more information. Just the struggle of this movie. Harrison Ford's, like, I guess, disdain for Ridley by the end of the movie. Even though they eventually kind of saw eye to eye and respect each other's work, it was a tough shoot. It was damp, it was cold. Ridley was a perfectionist. But you have a movie that ends up being highly influential, visually stunning. Even if the story is kind of loose, and sometimes you're like, wait, what? That's it? You know, there's no big end of the world plot. Like, one of the things that surprised me about Akira, because people are like, oh, Vinny, you like Blade Runner, you'll like Akira. On some level, I was expecting Akira to be a smaller story. This is a relatively small story, and I miss that. Like, you know, not everything needs to be about the end of the world. There's no... I mean, sure, you have some androids in LA, but if Deckard didn't exist, and they just lived their lives, not a whole lot would change. Roy Batty would still die. Tyrell would probably still die the same way. The other replicants would live their lives, probably just trying to get by. Maybe they wouldn't even hurt anyone. But as a result, though, you have a story about what it means to be human. That really is such a cliche, but it sums it up pretty nicely. You start to think about, well, what makes us human? Is it our memories? Is it our empathy? Is it our capacity to love? To understand our own mortality? And this movie does ask a lot of these questions, and it poses more questions that maybe you hadn't thought of, and it doesn't really give you a ton of answers. It just shows you through, I think, a relatively interesting noir plot. You get a lot of different perspectives. And again, Roy and Deckard, they're not so different in some ways, and in other ways they're polar opposites. And by the end, they have mutual respect for each other. Just as the Tears and Rain speech is happening and ends, they're both on the same page, and then Roy dies. Deckard gets to live. I don't often like to talk about a movie sequel because, you know, for a movie like this, where the sequel happened over 30 years later, I wouldn't want to bring that up too much, just because that's a different director. It's a different version of the world. It's a different vision. And what you have here is a self-contained story. So I get a lot from it, and it's a good movie to watch every couple years. It really makes me happy, and I love looking at it and, you know, thinking about it and learning about it. I definitely don't think it's the best movie ever made, and I get why people don't like it. I've said plenty of times, like, I didn't get it the first time I watched it, and then eventually I got it so much that I had to keep watching it. But for people that just watched it now for the first time, you should watch it without me, without my voice. You know, just go and find it, the Final Cut version, and just watch it again. And maybe you'll find something that you like about it even more. So yeah, that's Blade Runner. I appreciate you listening to this, and I hope I've led to some appreciation for the film. Take care, and maybe more commentary tracks in the future. Who knows? Maybe not. But this was good. Until next time, stay human.